5/11, 2019, starting a stream about world building on Twitch. Good morning. So let me get to where I'm actually watching the stream. Cool. So this morning, I got a little bit of homework from Aunt Emma, who is my creative partner on some of the Xeopsia stuff. Xeopsia is my Dungeons and Dragons world, and she really would like me to get off my butt and draw a decent world map for my planet. So I've been working on this setting for a long time now. So the maps that I have of it currently are really old and inadequate, and were made a long time ago on graphics software that hasn't even existed for a bunch of years. And you can kind of tell with like the 1990s typography that I've got going on in the one map that I've got up. So today I'm gonna redraw my world map. I'm gonna start out by doing some analog ink drawing, and then I'm gonna move it into Illustrator and make a digital version of it. And while I do that, I'm going to be going through some of the important things that you need to do when you're creating a map of fantasy world. So that'll include things like showing where plate tectonic activity is, and other major geological changes. And then from there, we can infer what the weather patterns are going to be like in various places on the planet that we're creating. And that'll tell us a ton about who can live in the various countries that we're setting up, how big their populations can be, where we'll have good farmland versus where we'll have deserts or forests or some other biome. And then, hey, welcome to the stream. So just to repeat real quick, what I'm doing this morning is working on my Dungeons and Dragons world. I've got a very, very old map here that I'm going to be redrawing. And I'm going to start out by drawing analog and then take it into Illustrator. And then I'm going to actually do some of the real work you have to do when you're setting up a fantasy world, such as figuring out what the geological activity and the weather patterns of your world are like so that it's a realistic world. So I'm going to actually switch over to my drawing pad right now. And you'll see here I've got a pretty basic map of this world that I'm working on set up here. It's just coastlines, and there are, if you're trying to make a geologically and like climatologically realistic fantasy world, there are a couple of ways of going about it. My preferred working method is I start by drawing coastlines. I draw coastlines that I like the look of, and that will let me put areas in that support the stories that I want to tell. So I'm not starting from like total geological purism, like there's a Pangea and now we have to figure out how the Pangea breaks up. Instead, we'll be going backwards from that. I'm gonna start with a continent that's already has a shape to it that I like. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to explain why it has that shape using realistic geology. So what I've got here is just one section of one continent of the world. And I'd like to expand it beyond that so that I can see more of the planet. So I will do that now. I think we'll just rip this page out, and here's some other stuff that I'm making. Lots of stuff that I'm making in the notebook right now. Cool, blank page. So, and you can see I'm kind of starting from this, but I know that I've got a western continent here somewhere that I've got to figure out. And I know that I want my eastern continent to be a little bit bigger. Right now, to me, I don't know what fantasy world this is reminding me of, but this is reminding me of another fantasy world that I've seen at some point. And I can't think of which one, but I don't want it to be too like that. So yeah, let's start by just drawing some coastlines. And I'll start So kind of the center of my world is this island mini continent called Xeopsia, and it is roughly the size of maybe the Scandinavian peninsula plus Denmark. Um, and I guess shape-wise, it's a little bit Icelandy, although it's much bigger than Iceland. And then Chaopsia is going to be part of a bit of an archipelago. So on my original map, I didn't have this as dense as I'd like, but what I want is there going to be some island channels in here with some nice islands, and then I want there to be a place called Upper Chaopsia that kind of stretches above it. That's a bit bigger, and we'll put like an interesting little strait in there. So this is interesting because this area is probably going to end up being politically linked to this area down here, but we've got water, so immediately we're talking about, there's some kind of thalassocracy in play here, waterborne sea power. Hey Ivica, how you doing? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Ivica. All right, so now let's see. Go back to my original map here. I was thinking about having this other. So I am doing like a Central Sea thing. I'm kind of. If you expected me to be not doing a Central Sea, no, I'm probably mailing it in a little bit here, but I've got this other continent that starts here. And I want to connect that and then have this actually go up. Ivica. Oh, okay. Ivica. I like the way that sounds a lot. You have a cool name. All right, so now this is going to be a little tricky for me to explain in terms of some of the tectonic activity here, but I'll burn that bridge when I cross it. And then I've got this other sort of arm of the continent up here. Let's see. How do I want that to go? I love drawing coastlines. You can just kind of trance out. And, I should give you guys a scale, shouldn't I? So, let me get another color here. I might want to be able to erase I probably would be able to erase this later, but we'll say that this distance here is 1,200 kilometers. Something like that. Okay, I'm glad you're down with the Central Sea. But what I wanted to try doing is have a north-south Central Sea. So, oh yeah, that's another thing we need to know. Our equator. Our equator in this world is down here somewhere. So this is 0 degrees lat right here. And that's going to be important, obviously, because that'll determine our climate. So from north to south, we're going to have some dramatic changes in the climate of our Central Sea. So that down in the most southerly part here, we've got like a arid, like kind of tropical or subtropical climate. But then as you get north, Cheops, which is where kind of the main, and we'll go ahead and put our big city on here. We've got a big city called Cheops, and that lies right here. And that's sort of the center, the omphalos of our campaign world. Now, I think I'm not doing a full globe here, although I'll eventually extrapolate this to a full globe. But right now, we're going to have this continent kind of go off this way, and over here is probably going to be terra incognita from the standpoint of the average person living over here. So likely there's some type of steppes or wide mountain range that's breaking this up, or perhaps we've got jungles. since this is near the equator. I haven't figured out where my rainfall is going yet, so we'll have to figure that out. Next, now I know I've got a western continent here, and I'm not going to show the whole thing, but you can see this is sort of planned from my. Here's my really old map of this that dates from the 1990s. Yeah. Yeah, so you can have like the Mediterranean, only it's got like Vikings on one end of it and, you know, I don't know, Egyptians on the other end is the idea. So yeah, so we're going to do this we're going to represent this western continent here as well. But I'm not going to be able to show the whole thing. But the presence of the western continent is important because it's part of what makes our central land so important to trade. Okay, cool. And then we've got, this comes out up here a bit. And then the other feature that I have, whoa, I went off the map there. The other feature that I have here that needs to be drawn in is this northern continent here, which kind of encircles up here. And this sort of sets us up. So here be monsters. This is where we have like some evil polar humanoids living, who will be trouble for the people who live up here. So yeah, let's now that I got the outlines, I can actually get this into Illustrator and start noodling with it in a little bit in there. So let me get a picture of this in its ground coastline state. And yeah, I am totally using my camera for this. Cool. So yeah, let's think about plate tectonics. What's going on with plate tectonics? Where are our geological hotspots, and how do they explain what I've got here? So, what I'm kind of thinking is let's do some plate boundaries. Let's figure out where those are. And what I can do for that is I can actually let's see. I can take this picture into Illustrator and use it there. Okay, cool. Bear with me a moment while I grab this photo off of Google. So what we can do in Illustrator is once we have this image down, I can open up an Illustrator agreement, an Illustrator window here. So let's do a new document. Oops, that's not really a size that I want. We'll go with web. And this works well for me for this because it's the same aspect ratio that I use for my my zine, which those of you who are interested in the zine, you can check out my Patreon link underneath me here. The next issue is coming out on the 31st of May, and that's where I put a lot of this stuff that I make on these streams. Yeah, so the coast first and plate tectonics approach later. I generally kind of go for what can I do to get an aesthetically pleasing coastline going. And for that, I really enjoy the process of sitting there and drawing out where the coast goes. Now, of course, that's you could do it the other way for sure. Like you could take the approach of I'm going to figure out where my plates are, and then I'm going to figure out where they move and get the coastlines that way. But yeah, for all practical purposes, I think you can you can do it either way, and it'll work well. So yeah, so that's the process that I'm following there, and I generally find that it works pretty well for me. I think I have drawn a fantasy world where I actually started with the plates, and then went from there, and it was cool. I mean, you can do it. I didn't like the output as much as when I just drew the coastlines first and then justified them later. Okay, so let's take this and adjust it a little bit. I've got to munch this so that it'll import cleanly into Illustrator. So what I'm going to do is crop her down, and then we'll do a curves command to take out some of our less prominent areas. So the way this tool works, for those who don't use Photoshop, is it lets you set sort of black and white values for your entire drawing. And well, you can see here I've gone a little overboard because now I've got this weird flare on this side. Oof, I took my picture in a shadowy room, so it's creating some problems for me. Okay, so accept that, and then we'll refine it a little bit and try to get this area here to be white. Come on! Actually, this is probably good enough for me to do a trace on. So I'll leave out some of my western area of this continent here because it's not super well defined anyway. And just grab my prominent coastlines. And then I can drag that over into Illustrator. And do, let's see, where's this command again? I'm going to do an image trace. And you go like that. And see what we get. Okay, so yeah, this is good. I've got a pretty good trace of all my lines now. So now, these are all vectors that I can work with very cleanly. And I can ungroup this so that they're not all one giant blob. Oops. Oh, that's one giant blob. Okay. This is going to take some finessing. First of all, let's shrink this to the size of the page. And then we will zip her up. Okay, cool. Yeah, so now I've got something that I can kind of start playing around with, like right here in Illustrator, which is great. And there's some junk in here that got grabbed that I don't need, but that's easy to clean up and get rid of. I can just select that quickly. This is the direct select tool. If you're not real familiar with Illustrator, this is one of your best friends when you have stuff to clean up like this, because it can it grabs individual objects out of a group and lets you delete them. Okay, then I don't need all these little goobers here. Oops. Okay. Sure, that's probably enough cleanup for now. I can go back and make it super pretty later. So I'm going to lock this layer, and let's talk about plates now. So it looks like we've got probably one plate that that's going to follow kind of this area here. So let's just use a brush. Actually, no, I'll use the pen tool for this, and I'm just going to outline what I think are some plate areas where tectonics are going on. So this area up here is interesting. Like, looks like probably we've got one plate that kind of comes along through here. So these two areas are getting progressively farther apart from each other. And then I think what might be interesting here So here we've got like a continental shelf, right, that runs along our coastline. Okay, and I'll stop there for now and just kind of square this off. So here possibly is the plate that these two continents are sitting on. And let me make that a color so it's a little easier to distinguish. Oops. What are we doing? This is not, my color picker is not cooperating. Oh, am I in grayscale mode? Hold on. That would be a weird thing if the entire project were in grayscale mode, and I'm trying to remember how to change color modes. Yeah, document color mode. Huh, no, RGB. That's weird. Okay. Oh, I see. My transparency setting needs to be... No. All right. Well, I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong exactly right now. But we'll deal with it for now. Okay. So there's one plate, right? And then we're gonna have like a... I'm guessing probably like an oceanic plate here. So I'm thinking that what happens is these two kind of connect here. So this is all one plate. But then there is an oceanic plate running through here. So let's make that transparent. Cool, okay. So we've got separation happening here, which means we're likely to have volcanoes along here. Underwater volcanoes. So let me get the volcano tool. So there we go. And for those who are following along and are interested in what's happening in Illustrator, when you're using the polygon tool, you have the ability to... Man, what the heck did I do to my color settings that everything's coming up gray? This is a weird and embarrassing problem to be having on a stream, especially when you're like kind of an experienced graphic designer, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Gray is okay at the moment. So probably there is a mid-oceanic ridge of volcanoes that happens here. And then there's a separation zone here. So this area is going to be especially volcano-y. And that's cool because that gives me a place to put this mountain called Mount Everglitter. That is sort of a stronghold of evil type place. So I can stick that there. What kind of species are you working on making? Tell us about that. Okay, cool. So those are my basic plate tectonics, but then I also like having some hotspot volcanoes involved. And I'm thinking about what is happening with this whole continent here as well. So it's likely that in some of these areas. So let's do, first of all, let's show the direction that these plates are going. So we'll add some arrowheads to here. Yeah, so this is an area where Spreading is happening. These two continents are moving farther away from each other. And there's going to be, there's going to be like a volcanic ridge down here. And then, what could be interesting if we want more volcanoes, there's a way to set that up. And that would be to set up like a subsidence zone where one plate is going underneath another. So if we want a subsidence zone, and I think there are a couple interesting places where I could put one of those. One idea that I have is maybe to break up this plate a little bit and have something going on here. So yeah, actually maybe let's think about this. We'll say that this plate only goes, oops, don't want to grab the whole thing, just want to grab this one point with the direct selector tool. And then, sorry, I was referring to the group selection tool as the direct selection tool earlier, which is not accurate. Okay, so cool. So these two plates are moving apart, but we can also say that this one here is got some movement this way, and it's maybe a little bit faster, so that creates a subsidence zone here. So we get a section here where this plate is moving on top of this plate, and we get a range of volcanoes all down one edge, which is great because I want these lands up here to be especially forbidding and hostile. Cold, forbidding, hostile, mountainous, volcanic. They've got everything. Cool. The camera's not showing my drawing. Oh. I am totally on the wrong... Thank you. I am totally on the wrong drawing there. Okay. Thanks, guys. So what I did here on the other drawing screen was I broke up this this plate over here a little bit, and I added. So we've got one plate. Whoops. We've got one plate that's kind of going this way. This is its own separate little plate here. And then actually I can take this out. We don't need that. So we've got this moving on top of this. This is spreading. And then there's also, these two are moving away from each other as well. So there's like a little fault line here. So yeah, there's our basic fault lines. Now what we want to do, so you can see from the spreading that's going on, like between these two big plates moving away from each other, we've got a volcanic ridge down the middle. That implies that there are going to be islands, and is also possibly, it might be that so that actually helps explain the formation of this island here. So Cheops, our island here, oops. So what I want to do is I want to make a separate icon here, and this is an extinct volcano. So these will be our, oops, let's see. So these will be how we find our mountain ranges. And I just totally lost the little thing that I copied there. Okay. Grab me that. Reverse your color. Cool. So Cheops here is going to have weather. Yeah, well, we're working on weather. We'll get to... I'm going to do the geology first and then the weather, because you have to have geology before you have weather. Yeah, so for Cheops here, Cheops is kind of on this we'll say there's this kind of ridge here that's been left, like a volcanic ridge that goes right down the center of this island. That's been left here by the plates spreading apart. And that goes right up to here where the city of Xeopsia is. So we've got a small continent that's kind of bisected. Yeah, exactly like Hawaii. Like this is, and or Iceland for that matter. Iceland is, you know, now in the case of Iceland, we would expect there to be more continent over here on the mid-oceanic ridge, but I'm not. I'm saying there's sort of a hot spot here instead. So let's see. Are there any other volcanic hotspots? That's a good question. Japan is a little bit more like what I've got going on up here in the north, where one plate is going underneath another. And as the one plate sinks beneath the other, it creates a volcano range right above where it's sinking. So yeah, we've got a Japan kind of ish region like up here at the top a little bit. Okay, and then let's talk about other volcanic hotspots. The cool thing about volcanic hotspots is they can be wherever. So I can decide that I've got a mountain range based on there being hotspot activity, as well as like my continents crunching into each other. But before I do hotspots, let's talk about crunch zones, since that's going to give me a bunch of mountains anyway. So I'm gonna say that I've got this guy up here, the Barrowlands. I'm gonna say that we've got a scattering of kind of extinct. Oops, these are hard to grab because they're just. I should fill these. Hold on. A little white fill in there so that they're easy to grab a hold of. Okay, so I've got these montañas here. So I've got some that are coming from... Oh, maybe it's better if it's the same color as what's behind it. No, that's no good either. Okay, we'll leave it like that for now. So I've got a mountain range, like, I've got probably a small mountain range here, like, kind of just formed by hotspot activity. But then I'm also going to say that this was originally an island. So where it smashes into the main continent here, I've got a fairly good-sized mountain range. That's going to be in this area, kind of blocking these off. And that's formed from the compression of this piece here up at the top that was originally a separate continent smashing into this one. What kind of volcanic ranges are good examples on Earth? So you've got a couple different kinds, right? You've got, somebody mentioned Hawaii, and Hawaii is a hotspot volcano. So that's just like a random spot under the crust where volcanoes are happening from stuff just welling up. And it's just a particularly hot spot in the Earth's crust for some reason. It doesn't have anything to do with continental boundaries. Then Iceland. Iceland is on the mid-Atlantic ridge. So Iceland is formed by the ocean floor separating and volcanoes coming up. And then what's another... An example of a crunch zone mountain range. Where's one of those? We would have to look at a world map real quick. Alright, so here's Google Earth. And let me see if I can find you an example of this kind of mountain range, crunch zone mountain range on our planet. Oh, like a volcano caldera? Yeah, those are fun. Okay, so crunch zone mountains are places where... Oh, actually, I know the perfect example of a crunch zone mountain range. And that would be... Whoa, Google Earth. I don't need all this intro right now. Perfect example of a crunch zone mountain range is... Whoa. Maybe I should have just used Google Maps. This is a pain in the butt. But I'm trying to... let me zoom this out a bit. and my Earth is like upside down. But here we go. Here it is. The Himalayas and the Tibetan Plateau. I don't know about the Rocky Mountains. They might be. They might be that kind of mountain range, but like sort of the ultimate example is the Himalayas. The Himalayas were formed. The Indian subcontinent was at one point separate from the rest of Asia and smashed in here and created the biggest mountain range on the planet from two plates going. So that's an example of that crunch zone mountain range, like a Volvo. Okay, so yeah, so I've got a good crunch zone mountain range right there. This area is also probably, whoops, this up here, Upper Xeopsia, is also sort of formed from these plates separating. So it's likely that it's kind of mountainous too, so I'm going to give it like a little middle mountain range here, and we'll say the rest was kind of eroded. I know that my lands up here are a bit mountainous, and I've got some capacity for crunching to be happening in some spots here, but I don't know if that's the main force. So here's where I resort to a hotspot. I know I want more mountains here, so I'm just gonna say, all right, I've got some hotspot volcanoes up here that are the result of another hotspot moving along here, and they sort of form a trail, which is characteristic of hotspot type activity. Okay, cool. So I've got a lot going on here. For people who have just joined the stream, what I'm doing is I'm taking my fantasy world and I'm thinking about plate tectonic activity and where my mountain ranges and things like that are going to be, so that I can start thinking about my weather patterns and things like that. Okay, so I'm also going to say that we had some crunching going on kind of up here. I want there to be like kind of a mountain range along this area. So these are some crunchy mountains that were formed in the distant past. So these are going to be old, right? Like if I can't see approximate cause for why they crunched on the map, then they're probably pretty old. So this will be an older, more worn mountain range here. And then I've got another crunch zone that I could have right here, where this bit of land became part of the main continent. So I've got another little mountain range kind of separating that area. And then over here, well, let's see. I've got a hotspot traveling up here, so I can put like some hotspot volcanoes up in here. The subsidence is happening on this side, so I'm not going to probably have a volcanic ridge here. But, oh yeah, sure. That's what I'm here for. That's why you're watching the stream. Okay, so let's see where else we have this stuff. Like, here's another area where we could have some crunching going on, right? So, like, this is kind of a natural area to have some mountains right here. And I know the rest of this is actually forest and swamp as I've developed it so far. So, we'll name this layer geology. And now we can move on to some other stuff. So I'm going to lock my geology layer. I don't really need the geology layer anymore. Let's see. This is getting pretty crowded. There's a lot on this map. And I kind of feel like drawing. So I'm gonna jump over back to my sketchpad for a minute. Let's take a look at how some of this is shaping up. We've got a kind of an old extinct volcano mountain range bisecting here, and then it comes right up to where I've got my city, which is fine. My city is supposed to be like that. Lava channels. Small volcanoes leading to super volcanoes. Yeah, definitely. So as I get to a closer level of resolution here, I can start to fill in some of those other features, like I'm probably going to have foothills around these mountains, so I can start putting in some round things for foothills. And then, like, yeah, up here, I've got some stuff, but, you know, those will probably be surrounded by smaller things. Thank you for bringing up lava channels. I wasn't going to go that crazy, but I like it. Up here, I've got a bit of a mountain range, right? Not a big one, just a small one. And that probably also tapers off into some hills. I've got my big scary mountain here that is sort of important in the plot of my world. And then I've got a rugged coastline here with a lot of mountains. And I'm not distinguishing too much between mountains and volcanoes. And the way the way a lot of volcanoes act, you don't know whether they're mountains or volcanoes anyway, until you do, and then you really know. And that's the fun thing with these hotspot volcanoes. Like, if you want to put a Pompeii in your world, where like you had a really big Mount St. Helens type explosion, and it sent out a 200-kilometer-per-hour white-hot cloud of ash that buried and burned everyone and everything. That's where you go to one of your hot spots and you say, oh, I've got some hot spots up here. I bet there are some nasty volcanoes as well. Geysers, yeah. So geysers are likely to be in our geothermal areas, right? So we've got some active geothermal areas, like the hot spots that we've put out here. And I'm not going to, at this scale, I'm not going to get down to drawing individual geysers, but yeah, where you've got active geothermal activity, you're likely to have geysers, hot springs, things like that. All right, so then I've got my inland mountain range here, and this is somewhat important because I want a lot of this area to be arid. So let's add another thing here that's very important, which is the prevailing winds. So most places are going to have prevailing winds, and in our case, they're going to largely be blowing from east to west. Now, this will get a little more complicated when we get into ocean currents, because we're going to have to figure out what ocean currents are likely. Those are going to be shaped by our mountains, but like globally, what I'm saying is we've got winds that go mostly from east to west. That means this area here is in a rain shadow, and therefore is going to be somewhat arid, although that'll be modified by the fact that it's coastline. And I end up with a climate a lot like the Levant, which is exactly what I want there. Yes, I'm drawing the maps for the Dungeons and the Dragons. It's exactly what I'm doing. This is my campaign world here. This is which I call Xeopsia, and I am going through and doing the geology, geography, and climate, so I can figure out what kind of populations my lands can support. So this is like some super realistic world building up in this channel. Okay, cool. Let's I like the idea of an underwater geyser, by the way. I'm just gonna put a pin in that one, underwater geyser, because I love it. I don't know where I'd put it on this map. It'd probably be somewhere along this mid-oceanic ridge. So that's another thing we'll note here is if you want to find the Tierra del Fuego or the Mare del Fuego, here's where your mid-oceanic volcanic ridge is. And that sort of, so that strongly implies to me actually that I've got some more islands here in the center of the ocean that I need to account for. So I am going to put in some islands. And I don't know what these... Oh, actually, I know exactly what these islands are. I had a plan for these islands. This is exciting. So this is where my dinosaur islands go, guys. So I have like an archipelago of dinosaur islands that I'm planning for this thing, and I now have my area where they should be. Clearly, they need to be along my mid-Atlantic volcanic ridge. Hollowed islands. Oh yeah. Yeah, if I were drawing it closer, like I'll probably let's have an atoll here. Here's one that's an atoll, just to remind me. And when I go back and do the regions, it'll get even more detailed. But for now, we're doing the grand scheme of things. Okay, and then I said I have a crunch zone mountain range here, where a long time ago, probably millions of years ago, this bit crunched into this bit here. And that's another thing that about this is I've got about 100,000 year history on my world here. So there's not a lot of stuff that's in the distant geologic past that's actually happening in relation to the campaign world. For most of the history of the campaign world, these continents and islands have been in this configuration. Yeah, Lost Worlds are the best. And dinosaurs? I'm still trying to figure out how to do dinosaurs in 5th edition, because I used to play Ark. Okay, I still play Ark sometimes. Let's be honest. But Ark, takes too much time, and really what I want out of Ark is I really want a Dungeons and Dragons game where everybody's riding dinosaurs. So that'll be some content that's coming out. I'm still trying to figure out how that works with the D&D action economy, because the D&D action economy really kind of screws with animal companions a lot. But I don't know. Maybe I'll just make a character class where you're a dinosaur. That's not what I'm doing today, though. Stay focused, Jack. All right, so I've got some mountains here, some mountains here. Maybe there's a little crunch zone mountain range down here too, because I've got this little peninsula here. So that's interesting. That might have smashed into here a long time ago. That gives me another fun little mountain range in here. Oh, and then I've got a big crunch zone mountain range up here. So those are my big geological details of my planet, and what I can do then, yeah, gotta be a ruined city. Coffee, excuse me. I promised coffee and world building, and there's been very little coffee. I promised myself coffee. I promised you guys world building. Okay, so yeah, build the world, then add the stuff. And I sort of did this with this. I mean, I've been working on this campaign world for a very long time, and I did actually sit down and do something like what I'm doing now in the early days, but I lost a lot of the stuff so I'm kind of doing this over in a way. But it's been a very long time, so I'm thinking at it with fresh eyes. So I know where I want stuff to be, and then, we can add stuff in afterwards. Origins by Lewis Dartnall. Oh, that sounds cool. I would read that. I would definitely read that. All right, so let's. We know now that I'm going to switch back to Illustrator for a little while. Imports and exports. Oh, that was a whole other stream that I did. So I actually the other day did a stream where I did trade routes. So it was like, here are the prevailing ocean currents. Here are they make leather here. They have whales up here. Here are a lot of fish. Where would the trade be? So I need to go back and redo what you're looking at here for this map now. But I know that, let's start a new layer. And we're going to call this layer weather. And get into some weather patterns. So I know that I've got a whole bunch of mountain ranges set up, and that those are definitely going to affect my rainfall patterns. And I've also established that my prevailing winds in this world are going this way. Oops. Wrong end of the thing. There we go. So what that means is that some areas are going to have more rain than others. And it's also going to affect our ocean currents. So if the prevailing winds go east to west, then... Oh, I should probably start making some... how do I want to do this? Let's see. So let's just do a climate map for now. We're going to say that this here is desert. If I'd been smart, I would have had some kind of textures set up for this, but I do not, so we'll do it with text. And then here we've got kind of a Mediterranean climate where it's sort of arid coastal. And kind of a similar thing here. But these more inland areas are going to be primarily deserty. All the way through here. Then here, we probably... I'm not sure what's here in this story yet, but I know that a very safe thing to say, climate-wise, is that here we've got steppe. So there's a big open steppe here. It's not the wettest, not the driest. It's just a big grassland. Okay, then up here. So we're gonna have another rain shadow up here, but this is like also like a very coastal area. So I'm gonna just say that this is arid. And then once you get down here, we'll say that this area is pretty wet. So where's our ocean currents? We're probably gonna have a current in here, and we've got wind coming from this way, and then being channeled through these mountains and then hitting these continents here. I just want to have crunch zones, yep. Which is like pretty fair, I think. So probably we have currents that go roughly this way. So there's one major ocean current that we need to worry about. Let me see if I can make that blue. And then we'll probably have another current that does a similar thing down here, only it's got a lot more ocean to get across. So if the prevailing winds are going this way, then likely we have like this kind of arrangement here. So there's another major ocean current. Follows down that way. And then once we get over to this area here, I think we could probably expect something kind of similar. Okay, and the neat effect of this is that it funnels a lot of trade into my central city here. So like I know that my central city is like a pretty important place in the world, and you know part of the reason for that is that there's ocean currents that carry everything within a relatively close distance in there, and if I want to like even emphasize that, I can show people are sailing up this way. Yeah, so there's our north-south Mare Nostrum all set up. And then currents over here are probably gonna is gonna do a similar thing where it goes this way. Although this isn't a particularly wide sea, so we might not even have big currents here. All right, so let's think about a little bit more about what the implications are for the rest of our lands based on this. So the prevailing winds, carry over here. This is probably more. This is probably plains here because it's coastal. So for the by steppe, I mean dry plains. By plains, I mean areas that you could farm. So probably as you go farther along here, you've got a lot of plains. Whoops. That are in areas. Here we go. So we've got a plains region there. This is a lot of plains, right? Well, I can't help it. I'm from Illinois. Jungles, yeah. There are definitely going to be jungles. So let's think about that a little bit. Where would they likely be? So we've got an ocean current that kind of cycles this way. So here's actually a good place for some jungle right there. And then this entire coast is very likely to be jungle because rain is just coming from this way. Right up to there. And then let's see, as we get to probably starts to turn into forest up here. We're likely to have another dry area immediately beyond this area here, and the area behind that there might be some steppe, although I'm actually interested in having a swamp here, and I'll figure out how to justify that later. I'm not expecting there to be a lot of plains. Realistically, there might be some coastal plains in some of these areas, like just right along the edges. And then you go north here, and it's just trackless forest. Likewise, the southern edge of this is probably heavily forested. But once you get up here, you start to get taiga. And you go far enough, and it turns into tundra. Up here, this northern coast is going to be, a lot of it is going to be like a taiga biome, maybe with some cold plains along the coast here, because I do have it where there's a little bit of farmland. Or actually, you know what I want these to be? I want these to be hills. Up here. So there's again, we've got a narrow coastal plain. Here's some hills. This is probably a very cold plain. It's probably almost tundra. Themyscira. Camont 6, what is Themyscira? I need to know. Cool. So I've got a lot of my biomes laid out here. Let's see. I'm going to go with sort of a dry, hilly biome for up here, and more of a hill biome for northern Cheops, or Xeopsia. Grab that. And some of these are probably... oh, okay. I had not heard of that before. Cool. All right. So I've got a lot of jungle down here, a lot of plains, steppe. That's cool. This mostly gives me what I need to know to actually do some farmland. So I think I mentioned at the start of the stream, but a lot of you weren't here. Part of the reason I was doing this, I'm working on some collaborative world building with my aunt, who was a D&D writer back in the 80s, and she looked at my world building thus far, declared it insufficient, and gave me homework of getting her a decent world map with this kind of information on it. So I am now, as a diligent nephew, doing my handoff here. So let's see. Now we can actually seriously start to talk about the people and what's going on with them. And let's see. I forget if I can. This thing doesn't do layer transparency as nicely as some of the other apps do. But what I can do here, just so I have a little bit less clutter and more room to work with, is I'm just going to take this entire layer, which I thought I had unlocked. What's going on? Oh, it would help if I have it displayed. Okay, so just take this entire layer and we'll make it partly transparent so that the rest of this stuff is kind of easier to get into. And then I'll do the same for this layer here. Cool. Okay. All right, so that's a little bit easier to work with. Yes, my aunt is very cool. She, if anybody wants to look at really old Dragon magazines, I think it was issue number 116, has like her naval rules in it. But right now she's getting ready to help me out with some of this stuff, and so it has to make sense to somebody other than me. I've just been writing random D&D modules in this world without having a big plan for it, and now I need a grand plan because somebody else is going to be looking at it. Being an oddball in your family is going into the army instead of the Marines. Wow, okay. We have a slightly different value of oddball in my family. So let's get some of our political divisions. So up here I have what I'm calling the Barrowlands, which are a whole group of petty kingdoms that are linked together. And these are kind of a fusion of like the Celts and Anglo-Saxon Britain. So what we're going to see in the Barrowlands is a lot of little petty kingdoms. So I'm not going to do all of them right now, but let me put in an example of one. I've got this little nothing of a sea kingdom along here that basically just skirts a large swath of coast, and that's it, called Ornholm. And this is a sea kingdom founded by Vikings, because yeah, my world has Vikings. And you know, their deal is this land that they have is not super great. up here. You can't farm it a lot, but you can raise goats like crazy. And let me make this even a little smaller because right now it's bigger than I want it to be. So they've got a few hundred kilometers of coastline that they jealously guard in these hills here, and you know, over the next hill is probably another petty kingdom that's exactly the same. Yeah, naval rules. Like first ed crunchy naval rules that old grognards like. So that's why I'm starting with plate tectonics, because I can't have my I can't slack off. 240 years. Whoa, that's some pressure. That's some pressure. Okay, so I've got this little country here called Ornholm. And Ornholm, well, what can we know about Ornholm from this map? It's hilly, it's coastal. They have a tiny little capital city called, we'll call it Orngard for now. So let's make this text even smaller. So Orngard is, obviously there's a very nice natural harbor here. So let's put Orngard right there. And so, probably some of you are wondering where the rivers are. Yep, fish and goats, for sure. So Orngard has fish and goats, and Orngard is definitely where it is. It's going to be a river mouth. So we haven't done a lot of rivers yet, but let's put our first river in here. The river that goes into Orngard. And that's going to originate up in these mountains up here. So its headwaters are mountain fed. And that'll cycle out to the coast there. And being a typical river, so it's going through a fairly hilly mountainous area, so it's not going to form a huge flat delta like a river would someplace else. But it probably does branch a little bit, so we'll have a little branch of the river that drains into the sea a little farther that way. And that is also very nice for Ornholm because it means that the heartland of their little country has a couple of rivers that they can defend. Cool. So there's a little Viking sea kingdom that'll be up there. Now let's look at the biggie here, my metropolis. So this got kind of gooped up here. Let me oops. Let me unlock this and take out a few and clean it up a little bit. So yeah, I'm using the group selection tool. Oops. In Illustrator to do this, and now I'm running into a thing where this is part of the lettering became part of the coastline, so I need to go in with the remove point tool and just shave away at these until it looks like a coastline instead of the letter X hanging off of a coastline. Cool. Okay, and my city is going to be right there. At the head of this fjord. The Xeopsia fjord. Oh yeah, water types. Okay, so far everything that I've drawn is saltwater, with the exception of that one river that I put in. And I haven't done lakes yet, obviously, so I need to, I'm going to need to put some lakes in at some point. So I could probably back up and do that, but let me just nail this thing down here first. So this is my big city. And I don't want that on that layer. I want it on my political map. So if you're using Illustrator, obviously, like, I'm making use of layers here, and that's all to the good with a project like this, because obviously it's good to be able to separate this stuff into a bunch of different layers. Mixed salt and freshwater pools. Huh. Oh, you got me. You just stumped me. I don't know where that would occur. I mean, like, obviously at the inner river system, like, you get brackish water. So, like, you know, where this river meets the sea here, like this bay here, the water might be somewhat brackish because it's fresh water entering into salt water. Pools of that? I don't know how those form. If you want to enlighten me, go for it. But there's Xeopsia, my big city, and you know what? I'm going to go back and think a little bit about ice ages and glaciation and things like that. As far as the ocean bed landscape, I don't think I'll go into that today. I'm planning on going for another 20 minutes here before I call it quits. But I will. Let me talk a little bit about glaciation. So I'm going to hide my political layer and my weather layer right now just to make this a little bit simpler. And let's do a glaciation map. So the idea here is we want to see where our glaciers were during the last ice age that this planet had. And from that, we can infer some of the other surface features, such as lakes and hills and wide plain areas. So let's go back to, we're going to say, 10 or 15,000 years prior to the present in my game world. Where was the ice cap and what did it look like? So I saw somebody else just joined the stream. We're doing the geology and climatology of a D&D world here, like building a realistic map that way. Okay, so let me do the glacial boundaries. So this would have been a pretty deep freeze, but here's the equator. So we're not going to see any glaciation really close to the equator, probably. Like, we're probably not going to see anything below this area here. So our main continent, or our main island land here of Xeopsia will probably not have been affected very much. But these northern lands here are going to have been affected a great deal by glaciers coming through and cleaning everything out. So actually, let me go back to my weather thing here, because this has some other information that we need. So glacial boundaries. Looks to me like this entire area here was glaciated. We've got no mountains until down here. And we've got, this is all fairly far north. So here's a boundary line for the ice. And let me make this an icy color. Okay, so it would cover the entirety of this thing. Probably spare this area here. And then come down this way. So that gives us something fun to play with. Yeah, so what we've got here is our glacier cover during the last ice age. So, and actually, let's see. Yeah, I think that looks good to me. So this area is likely to have a lot of glacier mess on it. The first thing that this kind of implies to me is that it's actually likely that we don't have a ton of hills here, or if we do have hills, they're glacial moraines. So what I'm going to say happened up in this area is that there's actually, we've got it represented already, so that's cool. So on our weather map here, so glaciers don't tear up mountain ranges, but they do make a mess, right? So this whole area here, I've got tundra and taiga and forest, and it's all probably going to be pretty darn flat, other than that. So I'm not likely to have very many hills in here, and these mountains are likely to be somewhat the worse for wear. Over here, this makes all sense. I've got flat taiga and forest. So again, this all just got pushed out and flattened. I might have some ranges of moraine hills here. So actually, one thing that's likely, let me make an icon for hills. And I'll turn on, I don't want this on this layer. I want this to be on my weather layer. Or, no, sorry, my geology layer. So go to the geology layer, and then I just need to take the bottom off of this so that it looks like a hill. And make it less transparent so we can actually see it. Okay, so here's my hill icon, and it is likely that all along here, along this boundary where the glaciers were, I've got a range of hills, and those are called moraine hills. And what happens with those is they get formed when a glacier scours the landscape. It pushes all of this stuff in front of it. So in areas that had heavy glaciation in the past, you'll see lines of moraine hills where the former boundary of the glacier was. And that'll probably be true up here as well. And along this boundary. So this is interesting because this gives us sort of a natural political boundary, or maybe cultural boundary, which is interesting because that was something that I kind of needed in here. And I'm going to say that as we go further east, these hills get farther spread out. It's a bigger, wider area, fewer mountains, less debris. Cool. So this gives me sort of another natural boundary. Like, it's likely that we've got maybe a different culture or something up here, or if there is, that there is some differentiation between them because you've got a defensible boundary. So this might be the boundary between two nations. We don't know yet. Now, the other thing with my glaciers is glaciers tend to tear out lakes. So we're going to have lakes in other places too, but the glacial lakes are going to be a big deal. Let's see. I think I need a water features. Lakes and rivers. We'll start another layer for that. No, Camelot, that's cool. I'm kind of like doing what I'm doing here, but I love that you're throwing all this stuff out there. Okay, so let's see where we've got glacial lakes. Well, we've got a nice area here where the glacier probably tore a lot out, so we can sensibly put a lake in this area here. We won't do a big crazy lake. We'll just do a little lake. The kind of lake that Luke Lux licks, if you remember that old Dr. Zeus book. And then, what am I doing? Keep hitting the window key instead of the alt key, sorry. We're likely to have some, up in here where a lot of scouring could have occurred. So let's play with this blob here and make some lakey shapes. And lakey shapes, they can vary a lot. It's pretty easy to justify the shape of a lake by the bodies of water that are feeding into it and by just local topography. And then, of course, you've got the magic of glaciers. Glaciers are not known for, being super neat. You know, it's funny you mentioned glacier dragons because I do in fact have a glacier dragon. uh, it lives over here. I've got this one. I should make this bigger because this is like my Mount Doom here, Mount Everglitter. It's a horrible place, and there's like an ice dragon that lives there. Okay, so where else do I have lakes? Where else do I want lakes? We're likely to have at least one up here somewhere. Lakes are hard. They're one of the trickier things to draw well and to have be realistic. And these are, I will probably play with these lakes a lot later on. For now, I just want to get some placeholders in there, and I can play with the shapes of them later. That's the fun thing about using Illustrator to draw this stuff, is Illustrator is very, you know, you can make a blob in Illustrator and then just sit there and play with it until it has a shape that you like. I don't love that, but it's good enough for now. Over on this side, I've probably got some lakes over here too. You know, we've got mountains up here, so they're not super likely to be in the path of the mountains, but if I had a big lake up here, that certainly wouldn't be out of place. And then for my other, so that's, oh, and then I've got this big area down here. There are almost certainly some lakes here. And oh, and I've got a mountain that drains off here. So like a great place for a lake actually is the periphery of this mountain. Anything that's draining off of this mountain can feed this. It's definitely got a good source of water. It's a place where glaciers could have torn it out as they came around here. So we'll put that there. And I think, I'm not sure, but I think Lake Baikal in Russia is actually kind of a similar situation to this, where it's a glacial lake that's in close proximity to some mountains, although I could be getting my Siberian geography wrong. If anybody's from Russia, I'm sorry, I'm screwing up your geography. And we'll put another glacial lake over here, just because it probably would be. And I'm not gonna, this just looks like a fat peanut. Whatever. You can tell I've been at this for almost an hour and a half. I'm starting to run out of gas a little bit. Okay, cool. So there we've got a pretty good start on our hydrography. Now what I want to do, I'm going to use my last few minutes here and do some rivers, because I haven't done any rivers yet. Rivers are super important, and I know where they're going to be coming from because I've got all these water features in place. So you know, the main way rivers form is they come out of mountain ranges where a large area has to drain. So, and then the other thing is, you know, where are they going to be relative to the winds and where the water's coming from. So we'll say we've got maybe another little river that comes down from here, cuts through this lake, and then empties out in this estuary here. That's a good place for a river. Since this is a sort of forky plain here, it's entirely possible that this river, forks, maybe up here, and has another branch that empties out here. So we'll have a branching river there. That might have some political implications. It definitely has some farming and where cities are implications. We're likely to see towns or cities at these mouths here of these little petty kingdoms up there. Then we've got this guy here, this big mountain range. So the way I see it, we probably have multiple streams and rivers that are starting up in the mountains. There we go. And emptying into this lake. So it's possible, like the shore of this lake here is probably I mean, this is likely to be a swamp on this side, right? And then it would drain. So rivers want to go to the sea, but they're not going to cross those hills there. So we could have a river draining into the sea right here. Good place for it. Feeds the plain there. And usually they only drain in one direction, but with this one it's possible there's a river going up here too. Okay, so we've got a lake here. Lakes often have river systems around them. In this case, I'm going to say there's another river that goes all the way up to here, drains that lake, and eventually goes to the sea. And that might have some forks and branches to it. We don't know yet. And then we've got a mountain range here. So that'll almost certainly sport some type of river system at some point. You can have that drain there. And then, you know, maybe we've got one that comes this way as well. Oh, I'm putting all these on the wrong layer. That's what's screwing me up. Whoops. Okay, try that again. Okay, so there's a river there, and then I'm seeing this as being kind of a rugged peninsula here. So we'll put a little river that drains from whatever's in the middle here. And then obvious place right here for another one. And this is a flat area, so I'm going to let this river branch out and form a delta. Because we don't have a cool delta area yet. We could use one of those. So there's a river delta. And then down here, we've got another mountain range coming up. And a lot of the rain is actually probably going to go this way. Because remember, we've got prevailing winds coming from the east forming a rain shadow. So a lot of the rain from this mountain is going to come down here, and it's going to form a life-giving river that runs across this steppe and is sort of the lifeblood of the steppe people. And we won't know where it goes yet. That goes off into terra incognita. But that gives us like a big river that penetrates this land, which is interesting. And then maybe there's a small river coming down here. Probably not much of one. So there's our rivers as influenced by mountain ranges. And it also implies that there might be some more lakes there. And then right here we got one. It comes down here. And we'll have one winding through here to this place. And this lake needs to drain somehow, so maybe there is a drainage that goes this way. And then finally we've got swamps over here, which I haven't really explained these swamps very well, so because I am an honest puck, I will take this out for the time being. I don't know how a swamp could be there, given that it's in a rain shadow behind these hills. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more work to justify that. All right, so let me, I'm about to wrap this up for the moment, but let's just talk about what I did during this stream just to wrap it up for you. So we started with the most basic kind of thing that we could have, which is I drew a bunch of coastlines, and now I'm going to justify why those coastlines exist. So then, after drawing the coastlines, I put in this geological area. The gray areas are the tectonic plates. The arrows show which way the plates are moving. And then we have mountain ranges and volcanoes that are implied by the geological activity underlying them. From there, we did weather. And we added some deep ocean currents so that we could figure out what some of the weather patterns are. And we decided that our prevailing winds went from east to west. We added glaciers, and that told us where some glacial lakes and hill ranges would be. I did one little kingdom just to show like where a kingdom would show up on this map. And then we started adding lakes and rivers. So on my next stream that I do with this stuff, I'm going to do a little bit deeper dive on what the political areas look like. Now that I know what all the weather patterns and big geographical features look like, I can start zooming into the individual regions and saying, all right, where's all the farmland? How many people live here? How many people can this land feed? All that sort of thing. So stay tuned for that. If you miss it, there will be a video up of it. Thanks so much for following. Follow my Patreon if that interests you, and have a great Saturday. Thanks for joining my stream.